Welcome to the National Black Leadership and Empowerment Project series, Ask an Elder. Today, Dr. Juanita Archer will grace us with her words of wisdom.
Hello, everyone. My name is Naki Franklin. I'm a student at North Carolina A&T State University. And today I'm talking with Dr. Juanita Archer, and she's a prominent member of the Washington, D.C. area medical community, and also a 3-time Howard University graduate. So thank you for being here today. So first, what do you remember about your first time voting, and what are some voting memories that you have?
My first time voting occurred in Norfolk.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the year before, I had failed to vote. And I will never forget, as I came home, let me back up a bit. At that point, I was a resident at Norfolk Community Hospital.
Okay.
That was a Black hospital that had some of the best nurses I have ever met. In addition to that, there were only a few Black physicians in Norfolk, but they practiced absolutely excellent medicine. However, because it was a relatively small hospital, 150 beds, and because, in fact, it was largely serving the Black community, its resources were sometimes limited, sometimes, not always. At any rate, as a resident, it meant that we worked extremely hard. We had 3 residents, 1 surgical resident from Howard, myself in internal medicine at that point, and a resident who came from Haiti. He was still learning quite a bit of medicine. At any rate, we really worked quite hard, and there was no such thing as set hours. You were supposed to be off every 3rd day, but this was before the National Residence Committee mandated that residents be treated as if they were human. Point is, I came home after not having voted, and a neighbor who had been a very good friend to call and ask me if I voted. And I said, this was primary. I said, no. She yelled out very loud, no matter what you have to do, unless you want this country in bad shape, you better vote the next time. And that stuck with me. It really did. She yelled all the way across the street. That stuck with me. And I've thought about her words with this election, but that was in 1967, 68.
Wow.
That was, and our country was in turmoil in 68 because of Martin Luther King's death.
Right.
Point is, that stuck with me. And I have never failed to vote since then, no matter what.
Wow.
And no matter what the election, I have voted.
What are some challenges that you faced with voting or experienced with voting?
Actually, the challenges for me started in Norfolk, Virginia. At that time, as I said before, Norfolk was highly prejudiced toward many people. And one of the challenges was finding a voting site.
Right. Okay.
Whereas the members of the white community had many voting sites then, there were only a few voting sites located close to the Black community.
Right.
And during the 60s, there were many Blacks who were affluent in the Norfolk area, very definitely so, but yet and still, finding a voting site and going to it, actually taking the time to drive to it, required a real effort.
Right.
That was the biggest challenge.
Okay, yes. That's definitely relevant today, especially with this presidential election, because, we're seeing the voter suppression still happening, and, they're making it harder for Black communities to vote. So,
Frederick Douglass, one of my heroes, said, agitate, agitate, agitate. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't happen today, because if we agitate, 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 and now I say vote and vote and vote, and this time vote and vote early.
Yes.
Get the same rights that everybody else has. There's no reason why I should pay taxes, or anybody who looks like me should pay taxes and not have the same benefit that everybody else has.
What advice do you have for young voters who feel like their vote doesn't matter, who, are choosing to opt out of voting?
Thank you for that question.
Yeah.
For young voters, let me point out first the advantage of your youth, the time that you have. You have time to look around at the world. And as a young voter, you actually see the world very clearly. You do indeed, because of the exposure that you've had. Your exposure and your knowledge base is so much more than ours was at the same time. And if you look around the world, you see what happens in countries where people cannot vote, cannot vote. If you look around the world, you see people who look like me, who look like many of our young voters, being mistreated. But then you have something else. You have the advantage of our wonderful Black history. Our history is to be prized. We were enslaved. And having been enslaved, if you look 400 years down the road, no other group has been able to bring its young to the point that we have been able to bring ours. Sure, we got problems. We've got all kinds of problems. I know about the shooting in Southeast, but I also know about wonderful people like you. So that just as we have problems that have been left over because of the 400 years that we have had to fight since enslavement, we have tremendous accomplishments and beautiful young people. But the reason to vote is to use that history to make sure that your children and your children's children continue to make progress.
Yes.
And if you don't want to look that far, just look at the next 4 years. The past 4 years, we have seen unbelievable things. For the young people who are 18, this is your society now. It is. 37,000 lives presented and continuing. Taking away health care from people who've had existing illnesses. Who would do that? Your vote is capable of changing that. Stopping the education. I knew when I was in school and my mother was giving me that check for $143 that it was important for me to continue getting education. You know it, and so do the young people who are in school today. You know it's important to continue getting that education. How are you going to compete unless you get it? But the next 4 years could, in fact, interrupt that education if your vote is not there. There are many, many reasons. So vote, and vote early. Yes. No matter where you are, vote early. And take somebody with you.
This message has been brought to you by the National Black Leadership and Empowerment Project.